Good morning and welcome to the Foster Swift Sports Talk podcast. My name is Dave Russell. I'm a partner with Foster Swift, Collins & Smith. I'm the head of our sports law group, and I'm joined with my co-host today, Tony Dalimonte and Charlie Sarchet. Today we're going to be talking about the ever-changing landscape in college athletics, in particular Division I college athletics, and what that's looked like over the last, 5 or 10 years and what it looks like going forward with the new House settlement. We're pleased to be joined today with two excellent guests. We have Coach Jake Boss Jr., the head baseball coach for Michigan State University. He's been the head coach there since 2008 and has amassed over 440 wins. He's only the third coach in program history to do so. He's produced, 45 Major League Baseball draftees. Is that right, Coach?
Something like that,
Something like that, a lot. I know.
It's been good.
And also, Coach Boss is a personal friend of mine. We actually work out together, but we'll make that a separate podcast.
That's another show for another time.
He does bench press more than me, so we'll just get that out there. In talking to Coach Boss, during our workouts, one of the things that comes up is these issues that, at times I think he's a little bit frustrated with and what it looks like going forward. So I knew he would be the perfect guest for this topic. And in talking about that, he said, I think you should also consider having Dr. Tom Dieters join us as well. That Tom really, and he's the founder and board president of Charitable Gift America. He's kind of predicted what's going to happen and has great insight on the future. And so, Tom, welcome, and thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. Great to be here.
And Tom, can you tell us a little bit about Charitable Gift America?
Sure. I established it in 2011, and what our real wheelhouse is we work with hundreds of charities around the country to create new revenue streams for them, mostly through life income plans with charitable gift annuities, pooled income funds, charitable remainder trusts, that type of work, I've been in that type of fundraising for over 30 years. It just so happened that 4 years ago when this NIL stuff started, I had heard about some people wanting to set up nonprofit collectives, which my mind immediately raced to compliance because, well, there's no charitable purpose to those. So I knew they wouldn't work, and inevitably they didn't. But I knew I had a legitimate national 501c3 public charity and had played baseball at Michigan State. And I thought, well, we have lots of funds. I'll just set up a fund within Charitable Gift America for MSU, and we'll raise just all sorts of money and put every program at the school on the map. That's kind of how it started. And then it has grown where now we have about 20 different schools that have funds with us, and we either partner with their collective or we are their only fund to help them raise money for their students as well. So that's how it started, and that's what it's evolved into.
That's great. Well, thanks for being here. I kind of want to go back, a little bit and have Tony and Charlie talk to us about what are two threshold cases, which were the Alston versus NCAA and what is now the House settlement that's set to be possibly approved on April 7th. So, Tony, can you talk to us a little bit about Alston and what that did?
Yeah, and, again, thanks, guys, for joining us. You agreed to sit down with a couple lawyers, so we got to go through a little bit of legal history here. So there's been a number of cases against the NCAA in the past, and the one that kind of set the groundwork for this whole thing is Alston, and that was a case by basketball players and football players alleging that the NCAA's restrictions on educational benefits violate antitrust law. And the Supreme Court ruled in 2021 9-0 that the NCAA could not restrict educational benefits. And so that kind of led to us to where we are today with the current state of NIL. States across the country, as you know, including Michigan, enacted their own sort of name, image, and likeness statutes. The NCAA changed their own rules to permit NIL. And so, Coach, we have Alston payments now that are sort of part of the whole package when recruits come in. And so that kind of led us to where we are with the House settlement that's happening Monday. And I don't want to take some of Charlie's shine on that, but tell us a little bit about what's going on there.
Yeah, so coming up on April 7th, the same day actually as the NCAA Men's Basketball Championship, is a final settlement hearing that's going to effectively, most likely, approve this settlement agreement that's gone into place between the NCAA, and it's a collection of 3 cases that are coming together. It's just known generally as the House settlement. It's going to be about a $2.8 billion settlement altogether. The smaller things it includes is, it gets rid of scholarship limits, and it also has a back pay element to it. But the big thing that everybody's talking about, and I'm sure that we will talk about a lot here today, is the new revenue sharing model that they're going to be implementing, where schools pay up to 22% of their revenue from, tickets, just athletic revenue in general, back to their students in the form of NIL payments. And that could be anywhere from $19 to $25 million a year, depending on the program.
And you're going to see most of that, Coach?
Right. Yes, exactly. Coming out of my bank account, actually. Yeah, that's right.
So, Coach, I want to step back a little bit and talk about what baseball and, just sports in general, I guess, looked like pre-Alston. Scholarship limits for you, transfer restrictions, what you were allowed to compensate a player, if anything.
Sure. Well, so before Alston, at least in baseball, we were funded to the maximum amount with scholarships at 11.7. We were able to give split 11.7 scholarships between 28 players, and then have a total of 35 on the roster. So you would have at least 7 guys every year that were recruited walk-ons, not getting any scholarship money at a minimum. Depending on the year, there could be more than that, depending on how you allot your scholarships and things of that nature. And transfers didn't happen a whole lot in our sport at our level, just because you had to sit for a year if you did decide to transfer. And so if you transferred down a level, you were immediately eligible. If you went from Division I to Division I, like I said, you had to sit for a year. It happened occasionally, and a lot of times there were some maybe extenuating circumstances. Kid was injured and was going to have to miss a year anyway, and so they would transfer at that point. But it was pretty rare. Alston came around, I think, in 21 maybe?
2021, yeah.
Yeah, and then the transfer portal, I think, was right around the same time, just after COVID. And when the portal initially happened, for us, at least in our sport, you didn't really see a whole lot of an impact right away. In 21, 22, I mean, there was an occasional, a kid here, a kid there. It's certainly not what it is now. I think in our sport, and I can't speak to any others, but I know in baseball there were roughly 300 schools in the Division I level, and there was a roughly, I think, an average of 9 kids per school that jumped in the portal, and that number continues to go up. And so the portal combined, Alston was I think a benefit for us. I mean, each university did it differently, but for us, we would allot the full amount to every student athlete, regardless of scholarship money. So we were fortunate that we could, I guess, afford to do that at Michigan State. And then, I mean, it certainly helped our recruiting, because now you take the kid that you were going to give no money to and maybe was just coming on academic aid or something like that, and now you could give them $5,980, which for an out-of-state kid is roughly 10%. For an in-state kid, it's probably double that. And so, that became very, very affordable to those guys. And so now, the rules are ever changing, and we'll find out more on next Monday. But that's kind of how we got to where we are, I guess, now.
So really, over the last 5 years, you've had massive changes, because you went from no compensation to some Alston money getting paid to the players, and then you went from name, image, and likeness not being allowed to be compensated to that coming into play around sometime in the last 5 years. So that obviously changed the landscape.
Incredibly different. Yeah. I mean, if you talk about the way we recruited, the way we offered our money before COVID even, that is, those are the dark ages now. I mean, it's hard to even remember how that was and how we operated under those rules, because things are so completely different now.
And so now with transfer restrictions, Are there any restrictions on the student athletes?
Well, no. I guess not as I understand it. You can transfer and be immediately eligible. Now, for us, there was talk about a mid-year transfer and being immediately eligible at that point. That has not happened, and hopefully, to be quite honest with you, hopefully that doesn't happen, because you could get players playing at Michigan, let's say, and playing a fall game for the University of Michigan and then transferring to Michigan State for the spring, which in a lot of sports now, some of those fall games will count, and so I think that could be a complete disaster. But it's just there really are no restrictions. You can jump in the portal, and just because you go in the portal doesn't mean you have to leave. Now, there was a time where once you got into the portal, we got the scholarship money back and could use it at that point to replace that. I believe those rules have changed a little bit now as well, where I don't get that scholarship money back unless that student athlete decides to, in fact, transfer to a different school. So, there are coaches that certainly feel hamstrung by the whole thing, and certainly makes things a little bit more difficult, and especially on our end, where they, Major League Baseball has moved the draft further back now into July. And depending on the date the portal closes, I believe it's July 1st this year. I don't know what my team would look like starting in September. And that could go as late as mid to late July. And so that gives me essentially 4 to 6 weeks to plug in any holes that I do have and try to put a team together by the start of school.
So you're kind of acting like a GM in that situation where you're looking at the portal yourself. You're, trying to decide who you're going to go after. Is that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we start looking in the portal, probably right around now. We've had some success with some lower level guys, and so a lot of those lower level guys will jump in the portal a little sooner. But our assistants are looking at that every day. They're combing through video, try to get our ducks in a row for when we can, reach out and contact, other student athletes, and at the same time trying to manage our own roster. We love the guys that we have, and we certainly would like to keep them all, but understanding that may not be possible. So I think you have to be prepared for any and all circumstances.
How has it changed managing sort of just the team dynamics in the locker room, knowing that, you may have some guys that are going to enter the portal and, going into practice and going into games? Has that changed throughout your career, obviously, in the world that we're living in now? Yeah,
I think it has. I don't know that it's impacted any types of decisions that, we make as far as lineup or, anything of that nature. I still think, maybe I'm a little old school here, but I still think as my job as a coach is, we have to win games, so I need to put my guys in the best position to win on that day. Then I think the other biggest part of my job is I need to do right by these guys. And so, certainly if there's a disciplinary issue that comes up, we'll deal with that. But, I don't know what each kid is thinking. I have an idea, but at the end of the day, you really don't. And so I think you have to honestly take it as cliche as it is, one day at a time. And I'm not going to read into anything, and that's not my job. My job is to put the best team out there that gives us a chance to win. And, we'll deal with whatever happens in our player meetings and after the season, and on the day that the portal opens, because that's really when you get all your information.
And I want to have Tom jump in here too to be part of this discussion. But before we do that, I want to ask you, so with the House settlement, what is that going to do, or has it done to your roster limits and your scholarships?
Well, I think the whole thing for a non-revenue sport, I think there are certainly, and I'm not the only one. You can go through every athletic department across the country and look at the non-revenue sports and talk about the unintended consequences of all of this that could be approved on April 7th. But for us and for, again, our entire department, the roster limits that have been set now by the NCAA, some sports are going to add roster spots, some rosters are going to be reduced. And our roster, we know across the NCAA level, this year was 40 to kind of help combat COVID. next year was supposed to be 35, back down to a normal number, and now it's 34. And I think a lot of schools will be below 34. So now we're in. Ours isn't the only sport. I know track and field, soccer's. There are plenty of sports, especially on the non-revenue side, that are losing roster spots. And so, the number of student athletes at Michigan State right now, I think, is 700, and that could be down to 600 a year from now. And that's just roster spots alone. You talk about, scholarship money. This extra $20 to $22 million has got to come from somewhere. And so, obviously, football and basketball pay the bills, and primarily football. And so that's, obviously that's where it's going first. And so the question now remains for us as a non-revenue sport, where do we fit into that mix? And so, baseball, along with a host of others, we're all still kind of waiting to hear.
So when the plaintiffs' attorneys in the House case say that for non-revenue sports that the scholarship money is going to explode.
Yeah, well, in theory, I guess it could. And by the letter of the law, sure. The scholarship limit in baseball next year is going to be 34, up from 11.7. So the max will be 34. There is not one school in the country, I guarantee you, that will be giving 34 scholarships to their baseball players. Some schools may add, half of a scholarship, or maybe up to 3 or 4 scholarships, but I can't see it going any higher than that, especially at our level. Now, when you talk about in the SEC, where a lot of these schools do generate some revenue, it's certainly not to the level that football does, by any means. And so, to say that they're going to be fully funded is certainly not true.
So, Tom, I'll bring it back to you. And obviously, the elephant in the room is that nobody knows really how this is going to shake out. And if they tell you they do, then they're either lying or they're from the future, right? So, from your point of view, as being the head of a collective, what are your kind of initial thoughts on this House settlement? How do you see it affecting collectives, and where do you see your collective going from here?
First, I just want to clarify: we are not a collective. We are more a cooperative. All of our contracts are endorsements. Every contract, and we have right now over 500 of them in place around the country, where every student has to promote our charitable services that Charitable Gift America provides. I know it's a nuance there, but it's fairly important, especially when you get into how the disclosure has to be with these NIL contracts, but that's a whole other conversation. I've always been of the opinion, and I don't think that the settlement's going to be approved. But realistically, it'll probably be bits and pieces are approved, some are not approved. I don't think collectives themselves are going to go away. They will at some schools. They already have at some schools, but I'll never be convinced that the Ohio States, the Alabamas of the world, or Oregon are not going to go well beyond what is now the base pay. Let's face it, if it's $20.5 million, that just raises the base is all it does. And so some schools are going to go way over that. And some schools won't. Some will be under it. It just depends on the school, the sport, and do they really want to compete.
Do you see less donors, less outside third-party donors being a part of this now, or less willing to donate to, the cooperative or collectives to get students to come in the door if they see that the school is just going to be doing this revenue sharing anyway?
You know what? That's a really good question, and one that I've had to answer now for 4 years. And you hear about donor fatigue all the time. And having been in fundraising for 30 years, donor fatigue is nothing new, okay? NIL fundraising is a tough sell, okay? A really tough sell. Because why should a donor have to make the payroll? Okay, you're bringing in $200 million a year into your school and you can't figure it out? Well, figure it out. Maybe if you're going to have $20.5 million, Jake won't like this, but that's okay. If there's a cap, which, by the way, I don't know how you're ever going to have a cap without the other side agreeing to it. Okay, they're going to get sued in a minute and lose. But maybe they ought to include coaches' salaries in that cap. See how that conversation goes. But, again, there's going to be some schools that go, go out of their way to compete in certain sports, and some won't. I know we talked about the non-revenue sports, if that's what you want to call them, and the battle for the money in there. But there are also battles between football and men's basketball on some campuses as well. Basketball might think that they deserve $10 million. In fact, I saw Indiana just announced they're going to spend $10 million on men's basketball. Well, I wonder how football feels about that, if indeed they're going to stick with the $20.5 million. But
Right.
Will it affect donor fundraising, to your question? If you're worried, if as a fundraising operation, and that's what these are, collectives are fundraising operations. The Spartan Fund is a fundraising operation. If you're worried about donor fatigue, it's your own fault. It's not the donor's fault. Okay. What are you providing for in exchange for these gifts? All right. Because they're gifts. Okay. This should be philanthropy, not transactions, but we all know it's pretty much transactional. But at Charitable Gift America, we have everything we always do is for the donor. We believe the donor should have control and direction of their philanthropic dollars, which is why we've been able to support 12 different teams at Michigan State University, because we don't decide where the money's going to go. Our donors tell us, give it to baseball, give it to volleyball, give it to wrestling, give it to soccer, whatever it is. We don't tell them. If I set up a fund and said, we need money so we can pay football, well, I'm going to alienate a whole lot of people. So it's an overall strategy to avoid donor fatigue, I believe. I know I didn't answer your question, but if you just on the surface say, is it going to affect donor contributions? Of course it is, if you don't have a good fundraising operation.
And that's interesting. You bring up how schools are going to allocate this funding, because schools want to compete, especially D1 schools. They want to compete at the highest level in every sport that they sponsor, right? And that, I feel like that previously was the goal, but I'm interested in seeing how that's going to shake out now. Like, they're not going to give as much money towards Michigan State, say, men's volleyball, right? And then a smaller school, maybe even a D3 school, is going to say, well, now we can compete with those programs, and they're going to convince people to. Instead of committing to a big D1 school, they're going to say we can probably offer you a better education, cheaper education. We can give you full rides, and you can come and compete with us, and then you'll be competing with these D1 programs all of a sudden.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting that Tom just said that he doesn't think the settlement will be approved. That there really is a possibility. My personal opinion is we're so far down the road, I don't know how you put the toothpaste back in the tube. These colleges have already prepared for this. I'm assuming, Coach, that you've heard of that.
We have, yeah. There are now. I don't know. I mean, we've taken precautions. I guess may be the wrong word, but we have prepared for that. I think there's a plan in place. The execution of the plan, whether it's Michigan State or anywhere else, is still a long way down the road, in my opinion. Just because we're all waiting to hear. What's going to happen next Monday. And so I think we all understand the plan could change dramatically tomorrow. So I think there is a plan in place. How that's executed, nobody knows.
But I think, we've all read or, heard about a lot of the major programs have already started making these allocation determinations.
Yeah, and I think that's part of, obviously the execution of that, and I think that goes toward recruiting too. I mean, recruiting never stops, and so we're recruiting for football and basketball right now, not only with the high school kid, but the portal, and I think those people, those recruits, those student athletes are looking for answers as well, and so I think that's part of the plan that comes, with all of this. It could all dramatically change on Tuesday, and I don't think I don't think anybody's thinking that way just yet. We'll see what happens on Tuesday.
Coach, you've dealt with players getting drafted in the past. Do you think that experience has helped prepare you for this world where kids have options and kids come to you and talk about the transfer portal, or, they get drafted in whatever round? How has that affected your experience in dealing with all this?
Yes and no. I think most of the time when a player gets drafted, we can see it coming. And so you have an opportunity to prepare, especially in the recruiting, battle. I mean, if, one of our guys is really playing well this spring, and we think we're going to lose him, we can, we'll go out and scour the junior college, we'll go out and scour the high schools and, see if we can plug that hole. Now with the transfer portal, you don't see a lot of those coming. And, we've had guys jump in the portal and all leave on good terms. We've had a couple guys jump in the portal and then decide to come back to Michigan State and just kind of test the waters a little bit, which is great for us. But, you can prepare on the pro side of it. For us, it's tough. It's a little bit tougher to prepare for the high school kid that ends up getting drafted. But still, you can kind of see that coming too. With the portal, in a lot of cases, you have no idea, and that could be a great meeting on a Monday after the season's over, and on a Tuesday he jumps in the portal, and you have no idea.
So, Coach, what does that look like if you have a player that jumps in the portal that you're trying to keep at Michigan State? Are you working with a collective or the university? How are you doing that to try to compete with dollars for these?
Yeah, a lot of it depends, I think, on the kid, on some of what our needs are. But yeah, I think when one of our kids jumped in the portal last year, I think there were a lot of SEC schools that were very interested in, and I knew we couldn't compete with that. They're talking a lot of money, and we could come up with some, but I couldn't compete with that. And then he kind of had some second thoughts and decided he wanted to come back. And then at that point, I tried to do right by him, because we wanted him back. And so, we made a couple phone calls and put some things together that could really help him out. And it worked out great through the generosity of a few donors. And, Tom, I know, talked to a few people, and Tom has worked with, several of our guys and does a great job with that. So that all worked out, really, really well for us. I think each case is different, and it's kind of like disciplinary issues with with your team. Each case is completely different. The kid that may not be going to class just because he doesn't want to go to class, that's a different one than the kid that's not going to class because his mom has cancer and he's trying to spend as much time with her. I mean, those are two completely different things. At the root of it, the kid's not going to class. Well, there are two different reasons. So I think very similar. I think when a guy jumps in the portal, wants to come back, at that point, we can have that conversation. And most of the time, we recruited him initially. Most of the time, we would be happy to take him back. But sometimes it's probably a better fit, at another place. And, again, we leave on good terms.
Tom, maybe we can talk maybe about some long-term effects that this settlement might have. Specifically, let's think about the Big Ten. Are you of the opinion that the Big Ten is going to privatize itself, or do you think that cooperatives and collectives like your cooperative might start to work with MSU athletics or the university's athletic departments directly to kind of maybe merge or just facilitate NIL deals between the school and the students?
Well, Michigan State specifically has their official NIL fund. That's Spartan Nation with Greg Williams. So we are not associated. Charitable Gift America is not affiliated with Michigan State, nor are we a booster of MSU. And I say that because, you guys are lawyers, okay? So those are technical terms that I like to say, because then our contracts do not require disclosure and they will not count against this artificial cap that we all are talking about. So no, I can't imagine a day where we would merge with Michigan State when the others already have. As far as privatization goes, I'm sure you guys have seen, I think there were some Disney executives or somebody like that, and somebody also from Milwaukee, that private equity firms is what they are. They want to privatize, not privatize, they want to just buy college football and basketball because they feel they can make money from it. And they probably can. They just would eliminate a lot of the schools that they don't want, a lot of the smaller Division I schools that don't get the TV ratings, which I don't think would be good for the sport. But that's where the first conversations about private equity coming into it. Privatization, I think, is a little bit different in that I am working to privatize Big Ten baseball, not national baseball, only because being a former player myself and followed Big Ten baseball literally my whole life because my oldest brother also played at Michigan State. Big Ten has a lot to offer in baseball, and they're not. I don't think that they've ever capitalized on it, and it's not their fault. It mostly revolves around the calendar. You can't play baseball in East Lansing in February. So I do think there's an opportunity to privatize Big Ten baseball and allow the kids to be employees, allow them to have contracts, which, by the way, I feel all the sports should be that way. And then you can have a collective bargaining agreement, and we can get rid of all of these transfer situations that you have now that Jake has to worry about, and so do all the other coaches. But if you get out of the NCAA for Big Ten baseball and start the season like MLB does around the 1st of April, and you have a West Coast division, a Midwest division, so you're not traveling back and forth across the country, spending all sorts of money doing it, and end up in maybe September or thereabouts having a World Series between the two divisions. I think it could really work because these Big Ten schools have the biggest fan bases. And let's face it, they don't have anything to do in the spring and the summer. So you don't need 80,000 people to show up at a Big Ten baseball game. But if in the middle of June, the Buckeyes are in Lansing playing a 4-game series, I think you get an awfully good crowd. And what that could do is turn Big Ten baseball into, I believe, the premier place for kids. Well, I call them kids, I guess they're not, for these younger ball players to play with incentives to win. So there would be monetary awards for making the playoffs and World Series, just like, professional. Well, it would be professional baseball. So yeah, I think, and I believe soccer is already going to that. You might not want to quote me on that, but I think they're merging with MLS or something like that. I'm not a soccer guy, but so it's already kind of happening. But the schools are going to have to decide, what do they want to be? Are we a university that provides opportunities for students, or are we a professional sports enterprise? And right now they're talking out of both sides of their mouths. They want it both ways. I can't ever envision a time when the schools would give up the multi-billion dollars that the NCAA basketball tournament is providing, or the college football playoffs. I don't believe they would ever give that up. But they might give up the other sports when, quite frankly, maybe it should be the other way around, to just provide opportunities for kids. But I guess that would be wishful thinking.
And Tom, I know you've got the crystal ball, so we'll call you on Monday after the hearing to find out if you were right or not. But what do you think the next 5-10 years of college athletics looks like? Because I agree with you. I love March Madness. I love college football. I love watching the NCAA tournament baseball. I mean, I think there's so many good things that comes with college athletics. I was a walk-on football player myself. And, where do you think this all goes in the next decade?
Well, let me just say two things before I answer that. First of all, I said, yes, I didn't think it would be approved, but I did say I think parts will be approved, parts will be disapproved. So I know that's a real wishy-washy answer, but I can't envision the entire court case being approved. I
sound like a lawyer.
Some things. Yeah, well, my lawyer told me to say that. And also, I'm very, very, proud, or happy that we were able to do this last fall. We had some donors come through, and we raised a pretty good sum of money, and we were able to give 4 kids on the Spartan football team, who all 4 were walk-ons, getting no NIL money, no scholarship, no nothing. They were working all summer just to pay to go to school and be on the team. And we raised enough money for all 4 of those walk-ons to completely pay for their room, board, tuition, everything. And so I was real happy about that. So I thought you would like that.
Absolutely. That's great. Love to hear that.
And essentially what we did was raise their scholarship limit up to 89, I guess. But going forward, I mean, I don't have a crystal ball. Nobody does. I just know this. There is billions of dollars coming in to college athletics. Okay. I know the NCAA and Charlie Baker are just depending on this, on House to be approved. And then they can say, here, Congress in Washington, we have our plan now. Give us our antitrust exemption so we can continue to control the athletes, which I hate, but obviously you can figure that out. But again, there's so much money coming in and checks aren't bouncing, okay? The revenue is getting bigger and bigger every year. Nobody's losing here. The kids are making, I just was told every starting guard in the SEC is going to be making $800 to at least $1 million next year. Football players are making 7 figures, so some basketball as well. Coaches are making 7- and 8-figure salaries. I'm sure Jake's right in that.
Not all
that
coaches,
range.
Tom.
Well, basketball and football are. So I can't imagine Congress wanting to step in the middle of college athletics when everybody's getting paid. I just, with everything else that's going on, I have a hard time believing that Congress will step in to get involved in athletics. It's just too risky for them. So I don't see the Washington helping out the NCAA at all. The NCAA is just going to have to figure it out if they even survive. But they will survive in basketball, that's for sure. But in football, you can probably see the Big Ten and SEC breaking away from them and creating their own playoffs. I mean, that would be my guess. I don't know. As far as all the other sports, boy, it's going to be up to each individual school. What sports do you want to compete in? I saw one school, I forget the name of it, just went from Division I to Division III. You might see some of those things. You might also see these basketball schools like in the Big East, the schools that don't play football, you might see them getting really good in basketball because they don't have football sucking off all of the revenue. So anyway, I don't know if that's a good answer, but that's where I think it's going to be.
So we're getting a little bit short on time here, but Coach, I want to ask you, as of now, I don't think new student athletes or recruits are signing a national letter of intent. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. And so what is it that they're signing?
It's a great question. I think there's a commitment letter or whatever it is that they are signing now. It doesn't mean a whole lot, and I think that binds them to a place like Michigan State for a year, I believe, and then obviously the portal kicks in or whatever. So there are certain rules with regard to scholarships and how long can a scholarship last now. It used to be a year-to-year scholarship, and then it was a 4-year scholarship, and there are a lot of different ways that you can write it now. And but again, this is all changing as well, and so it's just so completely different to what it was. We were not able to write in Alston money on an official scholarship, which I think gave a lot of parents some pause. You're telling me this is going to happen, but is it really going to happen? And all we could do was just say, I'm sorry, but you're going to have to take us at our word. And then a year ago I think it was, and we found out at least at Michigan State the Alston money was going to go away because any Alston money comes off that $22 million cap, and so then I had to go back and say, I'm sorry, but this is one of the unintended consequences of this whole settlement. So. It's recruiting is completely different now. The whole thing is just it is so far and above what anybody I think thought it would be, especially in our office. From 2019 or 2020 when COVID hit.
So, what advice would you give to young recruits and their parents?
Well, it's a tough time to be a high school senior. And a high school junior, I guess, because. Our game, I can't speak to anybody else, but I know our game's getting older. You see with the influx of transfers now, there's a philosophy out there with a lot of schools. Well, why would we bring in an 18-year-old when we can bring in a bunch of 23-year-olds? And I think there's probably some validity to that. But at the same time, maybe I'm a little bit, I guess, old school on it. I do think as an 18-year-old looking for a place to play. I think you need to be comfortable, number one, with the And this is nothing new. I mean, you need to be comfortable with the university. You need to be comfortable with the coaching staff. I think you need to understand that the percentage of players that are going to turn pro is very, very small. And I don't think a lot of high school people think that way. I think most kids come out of high school playing Division I sport, or baseball at least, probably football, basketball as well, thinking this is what they're going to do for a living someday. And sadly, that's the numbers, just aren't there to support that. So I think where you're going to develop, I think if you go into a place thinking that I'm going to be here for a year and then transfer, I think it's going to be a long road. So I think you be where your feet are, and and then just let it, I think not lower the expectations, but change the expectations to more of all right, where are we at now, where we're going to be at in 6 months, and then, reevaluate after that.
So, Jake, I'll ask you this first, and Tom, you can jump in on this as well if you have something to add. But so our firm launched Foster Swift Sports. How do you see lawyers like us being able to help student athletes, the university, collectives, cooperatives navigate this new landscape?
Well, hopefully that's a benefit for college athletics, because I think, each kid, not each kid, but most kids now, at least in baseball, will have some type of advisor coming out of high school and kind of doing all the dirty work for them, I guess. And I think in a lot of cases, these advisors don't know what they're doing. And there's no law degree behind it. It could be a friend of a friend, or it could be a guy that sells them a bill of goods and says, look, man, I'm going to help you get to the major leagues. And sadly, I think there are a lot of kids that are led away from where they really want to go because they're getting bad advice from the advisor. And so hopefully guys like you, across the country can kind of make some common sense out of all this and really help a young student athlete through a lot of these things, as opposed to just creating more havoc. A great example is that, we have advisors calling, some advisors in the past have called our players and said, listen, man, we've been working with you for, a year or whatever. You need to strike more guys out. Otherwise, you're not going to get drafted. And so now this kid's feeling all this pressure and all this weight, which is obviously not the way to handle it. But a lot of these guys don't know the right way to handle it. And so now my kid is, he's shaking off pitches when he shouldn't, right? And in order to try to strike this guy out, and, we've been doing this a long time, in a lot of cases longer than, these kids have been alive. And so I think we have a pretty good idea of what we're trying to do, and now we're out there changing the plays, with the kid who's trying to do something based on bad advice. And so hopefully, guys like yourself can bring a little bit of sense and sanity to all this, and actually give kids some good advice that is going to benefit them down the road.
Yeah, I would agree with everything Jake said, and just add, like, even this morning I'm getting phone calls from I use that term agent loosely, of a Division I basketball player, not a Michigan State player, a different school, and all I could think about was everything that Jake just said. It's like, why is this guy even involved? Okay. But I would just go back to where I do think, to bring sanity to all of this, we need to admit these kids are professional athletes. I believe they need to be employees. Then you can have a collective bargaining agreement. And part of that collective bargaining agreement can be registering and licensing agents, so people like you guys can provide advice to these students, rather than, shoot, I could call myself an agent right now if I felt like it at the college level, but you can't at the professional level because it's regulated. And so you need some regulation in there, not only for agents, but to control the salaries, the employment contracts, and terms of the contracts, meaning length, so they can't transfer unless there's a buyout.
Well, thank you both for being here today, Coach Boss, Tom. I really appreciate it. Very insightful. And to any of our listeners, if you do have questions about this ever-changing landscape, please feel free to reach out. We're going to have Mark Ewell, the Michigan High School Athletic Association director, on next week. But listen, and I'd be interested to hear his perspective on high school athletes and how this House settlement, and at that time, I guess we'll know if Tom was right or not, and whether it's approved. So,
Tom's always right. Always.
I can't be wrong because I didn't really give a real wishy-washy.
right. Well, so thanks for listening, and thanks again, Coach Boss.
Thanks
and
for
Tom.
having us.
Thanks, Coach. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
Guys.